Good evening and welcome to the 12th of December meeting of Cabinet. And because of the uncertainty with the weather, and many colleagues are out in the countryside, it's decided that we would be able to deal with this with a quorum here of 4 Cabinet members and then other officers and members being available to us via Teams. May I just please remind you to put mobile phone or electronic device on silent if they have one near them, and not to place papers or electronic devices between themselves and the microphones. I'm sure that the 4 of us here will do that. Please would remote participants mute microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and save bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. Members of the Council joining us remotely should leave cameras on. Officers leave cameras on only for the agenda item you are speaking on. After each item has been presented, I will invite members present in the room to ask questions first. Those members joining us remotely will then be invited to speak and indicate by using the raise your hand facility. Only those members of Cabinet present in the room will be making the decisions, and I will confirm the result verbally for the benefit of those watching on the webcast. Okay. To resolve that the minutes of the last meeting be confirmed as a correct record of the proceedings and will signed by me. Do you agree? Thank you. Lisa, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. And are there any additional items to the agenda?
There are none, Chair.
None. And are there any urgent decision items?
There are none, Chair.
Okay. Disclosure of interests. Please speak clearly if you have a personal and prejudicial and say the agenda item it refers to. No? Oh, Catherine, sorry.
Yes, I have a personal interest on agenda item 11 in that I'm a member of East Sussex County Council, which is the freeholder of Rice Swimming Pool.
Thank you. Fine. Agenda item 6, Ben Hook to introduce the report, being the King Offa Residential Development Brownfield Land Release Fund Round 1. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to invite our developments project manager, Thomas Atkinson, to provide some introduction for this, and I'll pick up some bits later on, if I may.
Yep. Thank you, Ben. Good evening, Thomas. It's nice to catch up with you again. It's the 3rd time in 3 days, I think. So, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cabinet. Thank you very much for having me today. So if you haven't met me, my name is Thomas Atkinson, and I'm the Developments Project Manager. So I'm here to introduce the King Offa Residential Development Site Cabinet Report. So in 2019, Rother District Council was successfully awarded £500,000 Brownfield Land Release Fund from a round 1 bid through our One Public Estate partner Spaces. So this funding comes directly from the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities with the aim of helping councils release more land for housing development. This funding is to be used for specific remediation works, including in the King Offa site, the demolition of the old high school kitchen dining room and adjacent highways works. So officers at RDC have recently been assured by East Sussex County Council that the land transfer as part of the Link Road land swap will be completed by the 31st of January 2023. So therefore the report is requesting approval to progress the development once the sale is complete. Officers will be able to start procurement, contract and delivery stages, assigning the £500,000 grant and a further £305,000 of facilitating costs. So the recommendation to council is that these costs be included in the council's capital programme. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Tom. If I just invite Ben Hook to make any further comments on this report, please, Ben.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I mean the purpose of this report really solely focuses on the use of the land in terms of getting the Brownfield Land Release Fund deployed. No decision yet is being recommended on the future of the site and how we look to bring that forward, but we'd look to bring that another paper forward in terms of outlining the options to Cabinet in the relatively near future. Once the land transfer has been undertaken and the planning permission that's been granted for the land is formally issued, which hasn't yet happened. So this is focusing at the moment just purely on the deployment of the Brownfield Land Release Fund rather than necessarily the wider future of the site at this stage.
Thank you for those comments. Any members here in the chamber that would like to ask a question? Councillor Christine Bayliss. Christine.
Yes, I would just like to ask about the current or the occupier of the land, which I think is a motorcycle training provider. I know, have we been doing some work to find alternative sites for that business?
Ben, yes, if you may, please.
Yeah. So we've been working through Locate East Sussex to try and help the current occupant find a new premises. I would say that the land is currently in the ownership of East Sussex County Council, and part of the land transfer arrangement is that they provide it to us with vacant possession. That's always been the arrangement since the land swap deal was agreed some 6-7 years ago now. So it's always been envisaged that the land would come to us as vacant possession. So they're dealing with that as a matter of a landlord with their tenant, although we are trying to assist and help whichever way we can.
Christine?
Oh, I'm satisfied that we're doing our best to support that business. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from within the chamber? No. So if I could go to those colleagues remote. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. A question to Ben. The original permission was for the building site and the leisure centre, which the leisure centre is sort of effectively on hold. Can you just explain to us all what is going to happen to that part of the permission? Because I think they were separated at some point.
Ben, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The planning permission is issued as a single whole, but with the idea that there's definitely two phases to be brought forward. So it was always envisaged that the housing element would be brought forward before any leisure element. Obviously, I don't want to preempt what might come out of the leisure facility strategy and the consultation. So, we're holding the other land in sort of abeyance until we've completed on delivering the housing at this stage and bringing forward a reserve matters application on that portion before addressing the leisure section at this stage.
What will happen to that land should the leisure facility consultation not ask for it to be used as a leisure centre, leisure facility?
That will then be a decision for the administration to make in terms of the cabinet, and then going on to full council for recommendations to look at future use for that land. So at this stage, we're looking to deploy the housing element of that planning permission with a view to keep the leisure element under review, and we'll bring back that decision for a future date depending on the outcome of the leisure facility strategy and decisions made from that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Catherine Field.
Yes, thank you. Same personal interest as a member of East Sussex County Council, which is currently the landowner.
Thank you. Are there any other questions remotely or here? No, there isn't. Can I have someone please to move this?
I propose and move it.
Thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Tom. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item, agenda item 7. Okay. This is the to set out proposed fees and charges for 2023-24. Deborah Keneally, Head of Neighbourhood Services, is not available this evening, so Ben will lead on this report, and then there'll be other comments from Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So this report proposes a set of revised fees and charges for a range of services provided by Rother District Council, and all of which are listed in the attached appendices 1 to 9. I would just remind members that there's been a revised Appendix 3 circulated. Has it not been circulated? Okay, there is a revised Appendix 3. I apologise, that can be circulated now, if members want it. There we go. Which outlines the updated charges with regards to the beach and foreshore, and that is due to an incorrect assumption on the VAT in the original printed report. But I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. In most cases, the recommended increases are in line with the current increase in inflation as based on the Consumer Prices Index in September 2022, which was at 10.1%. And for the purposes of setting the charges for 23-24, this has been rounded down to 10%. VAT is at the rate of 20%, as stated in the appendices, including Appendix 3, which is the beach hut and tent licences, which are now back up to 20% of VAT following a temporary reduction as part of the Welcome Back proposals through the COVID, which was there through COVID to help support that element of business. As the majority of the changes incorporate the 10% CPI rate, I'm only going to highlight the main exemptions to that. It should be noted that if the increases in charges are too high, the risk is that income levels are going to fall due to customer resistance and affordability. On the flip side, failure to achieve sufficient income may compromise the council's ability to fund other services that are statutory as savings are made elsewhere to mitigate the loss of income. So a balance needs to be sought and achieved wherever possible. A review of neighbourhood services revenue and expenditure has been undertaken to inform this report, taking into account staffing and contractor costs and alongside considering the cost of living crisis. Paragraph 60 of this report refers to additional revenue raised as a result of these recommendations. It should be noted that the increased Canberra Sands car parking charges are not included in the £160,000 figure, as they are difficult to estimate due to the dependency on weather and visitor numbers and etc. But the additional revenue could be somewhere between an extra £50,000 and £100,000 per annum. Paragraph 24 to 26 recommends an increase on the annual licence fee for both annual beach huts licences from £560 to £694, which is not the £650 stated in paragraph 24 as part of the updated appendix, and the seasonal tent licences from £386 to £478. This cost reflects the return of the VAT to 20%, which was down at 12.6% and 16%, which increased. Paragraph 27 proposes a range of increases above inflation for other foreshore services. Paragraphs 30 to 34 sets out proposed changes to some car parking charges. It is recommended that due to the current cost of living crisis affecting businesses and residents, off-street car parking daily tariffs should remain at current levels other than Canberra Sands summer tariffs that will increase. Paragraph 31 sets out proposed changes to car parking annual parking permits, most of which increase by 10%. However, it is proposed that the nominated permit for one car park for a single named car increases by more than 10%, from £350 to £500 per annum, which is the equivalent of £1.37 per day. This still represents good value for money, whilst permits for designated long-stay car parks, being Gibbets Marsh, Lower Market Battle and Wainwright Road, increase by 10% to the £355 per annum, which is equivalent to only 97 pence per day. This will achieve a greater price differential between the short-stay and long-stay car parks to encourage people who wish to park for longer to use the car parks a little further out of town. Paragraph 33 sets out the proposed increases to the summer tariffs for Canberra Central, Canberra Western and Old Lid car parks. The individual hourly rates are calculated so that visitors are not able to pay less for a longer period by buying multiples in shorter periods. And across the four tariffs, the proposed increases averages out about 15%. Finally, bulky waste collections, paragraphs 39 to 44, are remaining the same, and other than the 4 to 6 items, which is the most popular tariff, which is increasing by just over 5% to support increased contract costs, but lower than 10% so as not to deter residents from using this service and risk an increase in fly tipping, which is costly. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben. I think that's covered off most things that are there. I think garden waste collections is going up, yeah? There's a proposed increase on that. I think the report is pretty straightforward. But I think one or two members have got some questions to put forward or some comments to make. Christine?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'd like to move the report with the exception of Appendix 4 and the car park charges, which I would like to ask be deferred for some further work and some some further work around sensitivity analysis with regard to the nominated permit for one car. I know that the increase in the proposed charge to £500 per annum is quite a significant leap. However, and I know that we've discussed this. I've discussed this at the car park task and finish group. I would like to see the opportunity for weekly and monthly tickets introduced. I think to maybe offset that particular increase. I think the increase at the Delaware car park and maybe the Eversleigh Road car park to a lesser extent would mean that Wainwright Road would be more greatly used by local businesses, and that's a good thing. But I'm sure Councillor Timpey is going to say something about the Manor Gardens car park and the increase and how it relates there, because that is most of the permits there are utilised by residents. So for me, I'm proposing deferment. I think we need some sensitivity analysis, and we've got that because I think before 2020, when the car park charges were introduced, when the new style car park charges were introduced, actually the Delaware Pavilion car park was somewhere in the region, I think, of about £600 for an annual permit. It was quite considerably higher, but the number of permits were quite small. So we may be able to do a sensitivity analysis around that. And I do think that that we are talking about charges which impact on local businesses, and we should have a proper consultation before we progress. So I would like to suggest deferment on that basis. Thank you.
Yes, Ben, if you'd like to make a comment on that, please.
Thank you. I mean, whilst I'm not against obviously deferring to have a look at the car parking charges, if we defer and agree everything with the exception of the entirety of Appendix 4, it does mean that we can't increase the charges at Canberra. Now, these are the summer tariffs. They're not used by residents. They are entirely used by visitors to the area, and I don't think a £3 increase on the daily one is going to be a significant deterrent for those coming down for those days. So I suppose what I would ask is if you are looking to defer a discussion on parking charges, would it be possible to include the Canberra increases but would exclude the permit charges where you feel like with regards to the town centre areas might be challenging?
Okay, I would be prepared to accept that, but I'd be interested in hearing from Councillor Osborne, who's the local member for Canberra, before proposing that change.
Okay, if I can just invite Councillor Jaywan, because you put this report together with Deborah, I believe, and went through quite a bit of work with regards to the increased charges, which, apart from Appendix 4, which I think we've got to get this balance, and I think it's the balance that you mentioned earlier, Ben, to make sure there's a balance between not increasing charges too high, but also to make sure that they're at the right level to continue support. And it's the economic aspect of it all, because you pick up what's happening in our neighbouring boroughs where they're increasing charges, but they may have additional facilities that we don't have. But I think it's really important to get that balance because what the offering is within Rother is quite different to the adjacent local authorities at Hastings and Eastbourne. Ash.
Thank you. Yes. So it was some time ago now that we went through line by line looking at these, and from memory, the only one that did stick out was Canberra, and part of my conversation around that was that we needed more input from the ward councillors because there were some suggestions kind of thrown around the room about what we could do with Canberra. But overall, I think, as Ben said right at the beginning, it was about finding the right balance between increasing our income and revenue but without pricing people out of the market from the services that are there. So I think the charges that we came up with and the increases on the one that we came up with were proportionate, and realistically, I think the majority of them that we looked at were on the side of caution, i.e. the most minimal increase, and there were some of them that we reduced down below inflation effectively, just to make it a bit more palatable for our residents. So, yeah, with the exception of Canberra, I'd be happy to proceed with the remainder. Thank you.
And I think also we've got to bear in mind that the CPI review comes into place in the spring, and therefore on-road will be looked at. So there may be a movement towards some of our car parks from that respect. If I can just invite Councillor Hazel Timpley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd echo what Councillor Bayliss says about the car park permits being increased as much as they are. I think that will cause an issue, especially for residents up in Manor Barn. But I think having a look at it and being a bit more sensitive to that. So I would agree with that. I do have a question, just to clarify for my own, and maybe for some other people who might be listening. The parks and seafront activities where we're going to be charging for small activities with no more than 50 participants. This is para 15. Does that mean that if an activity is taking place on the promenade, it will be included in that? Or are we just talking about the lawns? Do we know?
Ben, can you hazard a guess at that?
I think at this stage I might have to ask Lindsay Goodwill to come in, and if she has an answer to that one, that's a bit too detailed for me to know the exact answer to that. But Lindsay is the operational manager.
I'm going to be asked that question, I know.
Okay. Yes, the reason for bringing in those charges is primarily for health and safety reasons. It's about us knowing what's going on our land and being able to manage that, making sure that any groups that are using our land are doing so safely. So the charges that we have put on there are fairly minimal. It's not designed as a great source of income. But yes, it would include anywhere that groups gather together to do sports activity sessions. That's Rotherland.
Okay, thank you for that, Lindsay.
So, Lindsay, that is the promenade, anywhere on the promenade?
Yes, that would include the promenade, unless it was classed as an event. So things, for example, a fun run or the Santa Dash, those kind of things come under our event management. But yes, any kind of yoga class or small group gathering on the promenade to do a sports activity session would be included.
Thanks, Lindsay. And then one other thing, what if they're doing a paid activity on the beach?
Again, that would be the same. If it was a sports session, it would come under the sports activity charges. If it were a larger event, it would come under our event charges.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Thanks, Chairman. And if I was there, I would also be supporting the deferment of Appendix 4, but maybe for slightly different reasons. I think it's important to look at what we're achieving and what we're trying to achieve here. And with the introduction of what I'll call our low-cost car parks, one in each town, we've actually now got a two-tier system where we can actually offer value to our residents who need it to park both daily and with a season ticket at very, very cheap prices. In fact, cheaper than they have been previously. And we're maintaining that with this report. But if to park in the say more premium car parks in the centre of town, it will cost more for a season ticket. But it's also very important to note that we're not intending to increase hourly charges. And I think that's a very important message we need to get across. That in this cost of living crisis, we are trying to do what we can with our very limited resources. And I think we need to make more of the fact that we have got the three low-cost car parks within the towns where people can park for very little money. And even so, even at £500, the cost of a permit is still much less than half price of what you would pay if you paid daily. Turning to Camber, I would also support the deferment of that, because I don't think we're bold enough with Camber. Camber costs us a lot of money as a council, and I think there's value to be had for the council out of tourists, even more than's proposed. I'll be very interested to hear what Paul says. I thought it was a very bold statement of Ben to say that no locals use the car parks. I would need that clarified, I think, by the parish council before agreeing with that. And if they do, then we need to come up with some way of making sure that locals aren't paying very high charges. But they're my comments, Chair.
Thank you for that, Kevin. And it's a good time to invite Paul to make observations on the ward over at Camber. And I think that somebody mentioned to me the other day that if people are going to Camber for the whole day, for them to pay £30 is actually really good value. And I think I would concur to agree with that, but it's something which we can go away with officers and look at the whole parking, charging tariffs to look at. Paul, I'm sure many local residents do use Camber out of season when it's not so busy for all the right activities. Perhaps you can give us an insight on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, very interesting, because I should probably say this quite quietly, but any sort of locals with any sort of local knowledge would drive straight through Camber and go to Jury's Gap, where you can park for nothing. But but I haven't said that. No, I would agree with the increase in the charges, especially in the summer months. And I would agree with the rounding of the figures as well. I was speaking to previous beach inspectors, and they've always said, whoever come up with £2.50 or £1.50 or whatever, it's easier to collect £3. So I know a lot of people are probably paying via Ringo or with a debit card or the phone now, but round figures are always easier. Obviously, winter use of the central car park, it would be predominantly by local people and people coming from outside the area to exercise horses on the beach and walk their dogs. But pretty much, I would say a lot of people would go along to Jury's Gap. So I don't have a problem with charging day trippers more money, I'm afraid. or I would agree with charging day trippers more money. The only other argument people might say in Camber is it gives them more incentive to park on my driveway and go away and or park on my front garden, but they do that when there's nowhere to park. So I think in general, like has been said, 18 quid. If you've just driven 60, 70 miles in a car with screaming kids, less than 20 quid to park the car's cheap day out. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I think I would concur with that. Lindsay, your hand is up. Do you want to make an observation as only the comments that have been made?
Yes, it was just to say, just to clarify that we are planning to keep the winter charges at the current level in Camber, purely because we know in the winter they are more used by residents. And the other point to consider is that at the moment, the on-street fine for people who are parking illegally is £35, which is set by central government and can't be changed. If we put our charges too high in the car parks, especially Camber Western, where people have to walk for 10 to 15 minutes over the dunes, we run the risk that they will choose to park on street on double yellow lines near to Camber Central, where they can have direct access onto the beach for not very much more money, which obviously has health and safety risks with getting emergency services in and out of the car park, should we need to. So it's just a word of caution there when we're considering setting Camber charges.
Okay, no, thank you for that point. At that point, I wasn't aware of the 35. I thought it was significantly more than that, but there we go. Councillor Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I need to declare a pecuniary interest, which I overlooked earlier in the meeting, and I apologise for that. I am a season ticket holder in a Rother car park. So I won't talk about that. Would it be acceptable to raise another point concerning parking, which has nothing to do with the cost of a season ticket?
I don't think it's relevant to this report, Paul.
Yes, it is relevant to this report.
All right, tell us what it's about then, and we'll decide whether or not it's something which I'll get an officer to respond to.
Okay. I'm specifically thinking of the Delaware car park. There used to be a charge until 8 p.m. It is now charged until 7 p.m. because it was trying to equate with the East Sussex parking charges, but they have increased their charges until 8 p.m. So it's possibly maybe worth considering, or the group that are going to look into parking may be worth considering raising our, extending our charges till 8 p.m. to equate with what East Sussex County Council is doing, and that would be an easy cash cow for Rother, which would help towards our budget deficit.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Lindsay, do you have a view on that, please? The Delaware car park and the times?
Yes, it was just to say we standardise the times across all car parks in the district. That might be something that we want to consider changing. Again, we used to have different hours of charging in Bexhill, from Rye and Battle, and different again in Camber. We standardised that a short while ago across the whole district, but as Councillor Cortell has said, part of that was because East Sussex County Council's charges finished earlier than our charges, and East Sussex have now changed that along the seafront in Bexhill. So it is something that could be considered again, but we would have to then consider the impact on the rest of the district and if it's something we would want to do across the district.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Ben, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's something that we can continue to look at in the next car parks steering group as we go forward with that work. I mean, I think there's a motion to defer item 4. So I think it's something, if that's what cabinet members are inclined to agree with, then maybe it's something, those discussions we can take place outside of this and formulate a response that the cabinet could approve.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's the intention. Christine, do you want to say something? Yeah, Hazel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Going back to the point about the Delaware and then having it across the district or across Bexhill, I wouldn't be in favour of that. I think there's a case that you could, in fact, just have it for the Delaware, because there are other car parks where there would be an issue, I think. A big issue.
I think these points are made and they can be looked at on the deferment of Appendix 4 and for some work to be done with officers and to bring that back. Is there someone going to move this?
Yes, I'm happy to move it, and I think with the exception of the Canberra charges, which could go through. But in terms of the deferment, if I could just make sure that we include the reasons for deferment are about consultation with business, about to investigate weekly and monthly permits and how whether they're cost effective, and we can pick up the issue about hours of operation. So defer Appendix 4 with the exception of Canberra for those reasons. Thank you.
Is that the
second?
Yeah. Is that the wishes of you've moved that? Kevin, do you want to make a comment before we put a vote on that?
Yeah, just want to put on record I don't support that. I would wish to defer the Canberra charges as well.
Okay. Well, I'm of a mind to suggest that we defer all car parking charges until we've been able to sort of do a bit of a balance on this to see the impact, because I think at the end of the day we've always got to start to look at the benefit of increased wallet share. And the costs, I believe, at Canberra in running the operation down there during the season is very expensive. And if we can claw back a little bit more from that, but I take the point that Lindsay made with regards to the £35 fee. But I think in fairness, we ought to look at all of the car parking charges. Ben?
I think the amendment as proposed, what that does give us the opportunity to do is does give us to embed the increase now, ready for the 1st of April. If at a later date we wish to increase that further as part of a more in-depth review of those charges, we can still do that. I think it's whether or not we might have an opportunity to come back to Cabinet prior to that April implementation for the in-depth review. And I was just sort of conscious that we want to make sure we get a level of increase at Canberra this season, even if we don't go as far as maybe that we could do with it at this stage. But we can always look at Canberra as part of the overall review that we look to bring back.
Okay. Ash, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you. Yeah, I think Ben's just answered my question, really, just around is there an opportunity to do both effectively? You know, just because we are going to agree those charges today, that doesn't mean that there's scope not to review it as a wider piece, in which case I'd support that. And also just to really find out what the timescales might look like in that deferment. When do we expect to kind of bring it back?
I think that will depend on work with officers in order to just look at the parking, but I think rather sooner rather than later, if we can try and find some time for that, I think that's very, very important that we do that. So is your amendment the same as it was, or you said you wanted to include Canberra?
Well, I think it's allowing Canberra charge increase
as it is.
Yeah.
But to be part of the review.
But if you it would be like a 0.4 of the review, if you like, to include Canberra in the review. Okay.
So you've moved that. Somebody second that. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next item, which is the. Goodness me. That's the one there, okay. This is Malcolm's report with regards to the changes that have taken place with our legal services, and there's a new head of legal and governance services for Rotherham Wilden. You're there somewhere, Malcolm?
Yes, Chairman, I am. Thank you very much. It's just really a factual report to let members know that the council should have a solicitor to the council, because that is the appropriate person on whom any legal documents are served. So, hence the reason for the report in front of you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Are there any questions? Something which is a straightforward administrative change and necessary? Somebody move? Yeah. Recommendation. Second. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Malcolm. We move on to item 9, which is the medium-term financial plan, a report of Tony Baden, our Chief Finance Officer, to consider recommendations arising from overview and scrutiny held on the 21st of November regarding the financial issues affecting the Council and the impact on financial forecast for the next 5 years. Tony did mention he wasn't sure about the next 5 days. The report and recommendations arising are produced within this report and should be read in conjunction with this report. Thank you, Tony. If you'd like to go forward, and I invite councillors to make observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, members. Yes, so this is the first phase of the budget setting process for the council. The report asks members to note the MTFP and the proposed way forward. The report also has in there an outdated recommendation, in a sense, around the council tax policy of a £5 or 2% increase. And you have to bear in mind that the report was written before the autumn statement was announced a few weeks back. So that 2% increase is now increased to 3%. And were we to adopt a 3% increase, it would yield a little bit more income, about £30,000 a year, but unfortunately nowhere near enough to get us out of the position that we're in. The recommendations also include a delegation of budget consultation piece to the Chief Finance Officer with Councillor Giron as the portfolio holder for finance, and that's progressed in a sense. In a sense, that recommendation has moved on as well, in that the consultations included the wider cabinet. Another recommendation is to remain as part of the East Sussex business rates pool. And this allows us to keep a proportion of any growth in business rates income that the council achieves, rather than give it all to central government. So that usually in the past has favoured us to do so. The pool lead is Wealdon District Council. They've made a calculation again that indicates that we get a marginal benefit from remaining in the pool. So that's the recommendation, is to continue to do that. And I think that the last recommendation, members, is that to agree that officers continue to develop savings proposals to maintain reserves to a level of a minimum of £5 million. I think I haven't probably been very clear on this point. I apologise if that's the case. What I'm trying to drive at here, the recommendation, or the key drive of the recommendation, is that we look to identify proposals to make savings and efficiencies, and then bring those proposals back to members for consideration. That's really the most important piece of that recommendation, more so than the level of reserves, which has underwent some discussion at Overview and Scrutiny Committee a few weeks ago. Just to remind members that as a Section 151 officer, I've got a legal obligation under Section 25 of the Local Government Act to state that I am satisfied with the level or the adequacy of the council's reserves, and I've got to put that in writing in the budget report that goes in January. Members may remember as well that that was actually a recommendation from the LGA peer review as well a few months ago. So it's not really the decision isn't really around what the level of reserve should be. That's my judgment call, which I'm obliged to make by law. I think the recommendation that came from Overview and Scrutiny Committee was very helpful in that it pretty much said the same thing anyway. And I think one of the comments, if I recall, was from Councillor Barnes about removing the words "to replenish," which I think is actually a helpful point as well, and didn't really help clarify things. So hopefully that's if we can simplify, I think, Chair, by saying that we look to make savings proposals that keeps the council's reserves to a minimum of £5 million. And hopefully that's clear. But I'll happily take questions on that a bit later. So other headlines in the report: the projected 2023-24 budget deficit is about 2.2 million at the moment. That's detailed in Appendix A. This deficit does reduce in time, but the budget is still reliant on reserves by 27-28 if we don't take any further actions. And in fact, they would fall to around about £2.3 million if we didn't take such action, and that's also spelt out in Appendix B. It's probably helpful just to go through a few of the issues that have worsened the situation for us, if you like. I mean, if you cast your mind back to about 12 months ago, the deficit or the forecast deficit 12 months ago was about £1 million less than what we're currently forecasting in Appendix A. And hence this is the need for further savings in addition to the financial stability programme. I've also added in some commentary in the report as well around Appendix C and the capital programme. And I think it's very important now going forward that whilst we're not taking anything out of the capital programme at this stage, certainly for the larger schemes, we will need to review these schemes on an affordability basis, on a one-by-one basis, if you like, before proposals are presented to members and members then agree or not agree those proposals. I think that's quite important. That'll be for schemes like Barnhorn Green. That'll be also include the food store and hotel development as well. So for those big schemes, I think we've got to do this. Whilst they're in the capital programme, we've got to do these more, if you like, more in-depth reviews or more current views, if you like. And the obvious reason for that is because the interest rate situation remains quite volatile, though it has actually stabilised over the last few weeks. Even so, the movements and the changes in reserves, even on a daily basis, they still go up and down in a pattern that we haven't really seen for a long time. So it's not to write those schemes off and say that we can't do them, but as I say, it is all about affordability and making sure that at the time we're looking to borrow, we can afford it, and we can, or we may decide to structure our borrowing requirement differently. The local government funding settlement, just say a little bit about that, Chair. That's due next week. As far as we know, it includes a 2-year settlement, and I don't expect that to be changing. That will provide us with certainty, which does help, even if the certainty is that we're not going to get as much money as we were hoping we're going to get. Just a quick run through some of the cost pressures. Not surprisingly, it's inflation that's really hitting us hard, as is the case, I'm sure, with many authorities up and down the council. Contractual inflation, for example, in the waste collection contract is in excess of £500,000. These sort of inflation formulae, if you like, are built into the contract, and they're driven by the current rates of RPI and CPI and so forth. So with, as Ben mentioned earlier in one of his reports, if you see CPI running at around 10% in excess of that as well, it's not really a surprise that you get so much inflation on some of our contractual payments that we have to make. We've seen an uprise in homelessness numbers as well. We've included a further 260k in the Q2 forecast for the current financial year on that, and we've built that into the budget for next year. Our external audit fees we know are going to go up. We've estimated that around about £100,000, and there's other inflationary increases as well. And I think it's also worth noting in Appendix A, there's a line there that I've maintained, or I've retained the budget contingency of £200,000. So ideally hope that we don't use that, but I think that's actually served us very well this year, especially with regards to the unexpected or additional increases in inflation and the pay award as well. It might not cover all of those things, but it's certainly helped us offset a large chunk of the problem. If I may just say a little bit more on the Financial Stability Programme and further savings. Paragraph 22 opens up that discussion about making further savings. There's no actual target set as such, but SLT have been working on this almost as we speak, and we have had some consultation and discussion with Cabinet around the approach to this. I think it's important that we start work now. We don't necessarily need to have these savings in place for 23-24, although it would be great if we were able to deliver some of them in 23-24. But if we're giving ourselves a much better chance of stabilising the budget for 24-25 if we start work on this now. It gives us over a year, almost the best part of a year and a half to get these things in place, and I think that's a very sensible approach to take. And also, it's worth reminding members that one of the key threads, if you like, of the corporate plan was achieving corporate plan objectives was to achieve financial stability. So things have changed drastically over the last 12 months, not through any fault of the councils, and we have a flexible plan which is helping us to respond to that situation. Government grant funding, so just a little bit more about that. We won't know what that's going to look like until the announcement next week. We have anticipated a decrease of around about £250,000 to £300,000 per annum. The biggest uncertainty is around the new homes bonus grant. This is set out in the table in paragraph 26, by the way. We've been told in the past that the new homes bonus grant will disappear, and we're not sure what, if anything, its predecessor is going to look like. So I'm hoping that we've been pessimistic on that front, but it may well be that we've been very realistic as well. I think that's pretty much it, Chair. I'm not sure there's much else I can add that I haven't already said, but I just want to re-emphasise that point, if I may, because I think it's caused a little bit of confusion around the adequate reserves. This is my sort of judgment as the Section 151 officer, and it's something that I'm legally obliged to make a statement on. And as I say, it was a key recommendation of the LGA peer review. So I hope that if we could take a sort of a more simplistic approach and say it's £5 million and we don't want to go below that level, hopefully that will clear up a lot of the confusion that I may have caused. And if I have caused any, I apologise for that. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Ash, would you like to make any observations? I know you've done some work with Tony on this, but you've also been away. So is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing further to add, thank you, based on Tony's summary. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Christine?
Yes, well, I just wanted to say, it sort of makes your heart sink, I think, when we look at the sort of situation we found ourselves in 3 and a bit years ago. All our efforts, if you like, to row back on the situation where we were relying so much on reserves were thrown by COVID, and that has really stymied our efforts. And now, of course, we've got this situation with the cost of living crisis and the crisis with fuel and electricity. I would like to say a thank you to Ben and the team. I know that there's a lot of disappointment about the Town Hall Renaissance project and what happened with that. Some people have dubbed that a vanity project, but I'd like to assure anybody listening this particular broadcast that was never the intention for the Town Hall Renaissance. It was, in fact, a real effort to make sure that the costs that we were paying out in terms of running, a very, very old building were minimised by redeveloping some of the villas. And I'm very pleased to receive a message today to say that the villas are going to be mothballed. The staff are actually going to be moving into Amherst Road, into some refurbished office facilities there, where we have got solar panel array on the top, which helps with our electricity bill. And I understand that there's a potential saving of £78,000 in heating costs for the remainder of this winter, which is a phenomenal sum, and perhaps demonstrates the need for long-term solution to the accommodation that we are operating from, apart from lots of other reasons why that particular project is needed. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Ben and the team for bringing forward and acting on that. And I don't know if he's got anything further to say.
Would you like to make any further comment, Ben? I'm fine. I didn't think so. Before I go out to members who've got one or two hands up, I could just invite Chair of Scrutiny, Paul, on the basis that this came to you. Seems an awful long time ago, 21st of November, doesn't it? And here we are looking at all of this again. So, Paul, is there anything you'd like to further add with regard to the recommendations that come out of that meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. No, not necessarily. I think Tony's mentioned the one that was a main concern to scrutiny and came up with the recommendation 5, which was the reserve sort of either a third or 5 million. Tony prefers the 5 million, and I know I've had a back and forth with Councillor Barnes over the minutes as well. He wanted a more robust minute, and he was very concerned that the minute wasn't robust enough to sort of mention the level of reserves, and I'm sure he'll come in a minute and say exactly that. But Councillor Dixon was at scrutiny, and I think he got the message from scrutiny and the way members felt, as did Tony. So I've nothing much to add, Chairman, except for the robustness of the level of reserves, which I'm sure Councillor Barnes will probably mention in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. No, Councillor Timpey doesn't want to make a comment. I'll go. I think it was there's a hand up, Councillor Barnes, and then Councillor Jonathan Vinehall.
Chairman, if I can begin with just reminding you, because it shows what can happen very fast indeed, that the cost of the Town Hall project rose by about 10 million in the course of the year. I think inflation is a major enemy of this council. I would also like to make the point that there are only 8 councils across England that don't maintain at least a third of their net spend in reserves. That's why I moved my motion, which was unanimously supported by overview and scrutiny, that we should set a minimum level that was a third or 5 million. Tony, as Councillor Osborne has said, prefers the 5 million. I must say I'm happy with the level of a third or 5 million. I can't believe that actually the two are going to vary very much in the next few years. What worried me was the insertion in the minutes of something which I did not move, which is or replenish. And that has crept into your recommendations. And it makes me very uneasy, because if you look at the figures which are given in the table in paragraph 34, and these are figures that actually presume that we're going to deliver a stability programme of over 4 million in savings. And yet, at the moment, we're forecasting, and to my consternation, apparently accepted by our auditors, where we're going to dip right down under the 5 million mark or third until we get to at least 2027, 2028. It could be the end of the decade, frankly, on that programme, on which we will get back to the minimum level of reserves which we actually ought to preserve. The notion that we should go further, given the way we could be knocked off course by another pandemic or by something going wrong in the capital programme, really means, I think, we need to be more cautious than we are being at the moment. I welcome what Tony had to say as our Section 151 officer. I think in any council with a large capital programme, you must actually maintain a minimum level of what is, after all, only a third of our net spend, because you could easily be knocked off course. And by the time we put the situation right, you will be in a major cutting of programmes, many of which are essential to our residents. So I really would welcome you taking out the words or replenish and really develop a programme to actually maintain that minimum level of reserves. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, which I'm sure Tony would like to come back on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's actually my intention, and hence had to apologise for the confusion. I absolutely agree with what Councillor Barnes is saying. The words "or replenish" haven't helped. I didn't mean it to confuse, but I think he's absolutely right. It's not helpful, and I think they should come out. I would absolutely endorse that, and that is what I was trying to say in my presentation just a few minutes ago. So definitely, I think that has to be the way to go. Can I just clarify one point, though? It's not Grant Thornton that have dictated or said what, or indicate what our level of reserves should be. The 5-year plan that you see in front of you is a forecast of what the reserves will look like if we don't take further action. Hence the recommendation to develop further savings in addition to the FSP ones that we're already working on. What the reference to Grant Thornton, just to be clear, is that they did publish a general paper or general article whereby it's made reference to ideally reserves being 5 at least, or maximum minimum rather of 5 and 10, or 5. Start again. A minimum of between 5 and 10% of your usable your usable reserves. Now, 10% in our case would be around about £1.5 million. Clearly, that's not what I'm saying. That's not absolutely not what I'm advocating either. I'm saying that we should be going for the 5 million figure. But just to be clear, it wasn't Grant Thornton that were supporting behind the recommendation or anything like that. This was just a bit of context to provide members with their comment would have been relevant to or in reference to all sorts of council sizes. So bigger councils, far bigger county councils, for example, their 10% figure would be 10% of their net revenue budget would be much, much bigger than ours is, obviously. So it was more of a general paper. And it's, I don't want members or the public to think that this is acting on a recommendation or any input from Grant Thornton, because it wasn't. And I certainly wouldn't advocate us driving our reserves down to 10% of our net budget.
Thank you for that clarification, Tony. I think that may have, and that particular recommendation from scrutiny will be amended accordingly for the words "or replenished" to be withdrawn. Jonathan Vinehall.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Tony. I don't disagree with your recommendations at all, or the position as a Section 151 officer that you find yourself in, having to even contemplate these issues. But I do want to remind everybody why the Council is in the position that we are in. And I do believe over the last 3.5 years, despite incredible headwinds, this administration has managed to maintain a level of reserves in line with, I think, what was expected, despite not being able to recover considerable money from the COVID crisis. A failure, an absolute failure by a Conservative Party, and this is a political statement, who we are led to believe are those who protect and are financially astute, failed for 5 years to lift revenue in line with expenses, or even near expenses, or at all. They didn't. This is a failure of accounting 101 by the group of people who hold themselves up as those who are financially astute. And of course, we have seen recently what that has done to our national economy. £1 million a year and £6 million in reserves is what we would have. And that is an appalling state and needs to be repeated constantly for people to be reminded what was happening in those 5 years. Were every member of that Conservative group who dominated this council simply asleep? Because if they were awake and had simply followed the basic rule that you have to match your revenue with your expenses, or as close to it as you can, then we would probably not be anywhere near the situation to put an officer, a Section 151 officer, in the position of having to remind this council of what might happen should the current trend continue. We are responsible for delivering a number of statutory services and we choose a number of discretionary services. And the fact is that we will have to look at those discretionary services to survive unless the Conservative government agrees to allow local councils to raise council tax to just cover the statutory services, the simple statutory services. And I'm pleased to say that they are announcing that they will be increasing the centrally controlled planning application costs, and that will help a little bit in defraying the considerable increase in cost.
We've lost you, Jonathan.
That won't go anywhere near covering the extra discretion, the extra statutory services through homelessness and just rehoming those who are on the housing list. So I'm sorry that's a bit of a long statement, but we need to be reminded why this council is where it is and what this administration has done to try and rectify that situation.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments there. Councillor Barnes, I don't really want this to get into a debate of what was said there. I think we keep it factual to this report.
Well, I was not a member of the administration, which I think is probably the administration last but one that is being referred to. I would remind you at that stage we were getting government grants, and indeed the last administration built the reserves up to £18 million, which is a substantial figure, well above the 5 million. The other thing, though, I would ask, Tony, is just to put on record what that failure to increase the base actually did contribute in terms of a figure, because I think Councillor Vinehall is somewhat exaggerating the effect.
Perhaps I can invite Tony Baden to respond to that inquiry.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to hand, Chair, but I've been asked this question several times over the last 12 months, so I can provide that information. So I came armed with to Cabinet tonight, or virtually speaking, with facts and figures around the 23-24 budget and the 5-year forecast, not any historical information. So I apologise for not having that to hand. I do have it, and I can share it with Cabinet and members at a later date. Well, I don't want to guess what the financial impact is at the moment. I want to make sure that I've got my facts right before I share it with members. But the information is there, and I've shared it with members many times, several times, and some of them are here tonight.
Okay, Tony, thank you for that. Jonathan, is this related to?
Yes, I will. I will respond to Councillor Barnes. It is £1 million a year in revenue, and circa £6 million in reserves. That has been recorded a number of times, and it is basic accounting that you do not pay for your ongoing expenses from one-off grants. It is just basic accounting 101, and that is why there was that failure in simple accounting, really, accepting one-off grants instead of raising your revenue on an annual basis. Okay. It's very simple accounting. It's simple accounting.
Okay, thank you for making that point. Is someone going to move? Councillor Cortell, I think you had a couple of questions that were sent in earlier. Perhaps I can invite Tony Baden to answer your questions.
Fine.
Do you want to read them out again?
I could do. First of all, I'd like to strongly endorse everything that Councillor Vinehall has said, and I would question the £18 million of reserves at the end of the last administration. Unfortunately, I haven't got the figures in front of me to challenge that, or can find them fast enough. But
could I ask your question, sorry, please?
My first one is paragraph 22 states officers have already held preliminary discussions with members and will develop proposals as to how the funding gap should be addressed. I'm interested to know which members were involved in these discussions and what the preliminary conclusions are or were reached.
Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the preliminary discussions were with Cabinet members. I think it's probably stretching the point. I think I mentioned this in my introduction of the report, that I don't think any preliminary conclusions as such were reached in terms of actual proposals of figures. In fact, I know they weren't. But it was agreed that SLT would be tasked with developing an approach with a view to identifying further savings and efficiencies, and report back to members in due course.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Second question?
My second question involves staffing costs. In paragraph 14, it was indicated that staffing costs for 23-24 are assuming an increase of 3% or £207,000. I wonder whether this is realistic, particularly in view of the consumer price index running at 10% and the non-staffing cost inflation being assumed to be 4.57%.
Thank you for that. I think you asked that question at scrutiny, Paul, and I'm sure the same answer will come now from Tony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I don't remember getting that question at scrutiny, so I hope I'm going to be consistent here. But the answer, I mean, to be Yeah, to be blunt about it, I guess, Chair, it really is a question of judgment. I mean, if I could predict accurately what the pay award or what inflation will be next year, then I'd be probably be giving everybody the lottery numbers on Saturday. It's my view, and I think it's a realistic assumption. Economic forecasts that we've been receiving from Link, our Treasury Management advisors, they all point to a drop in inflation during next year. I think the point that, or the issue that we're not sure about is by how much and the exact timing of it, but they are pointing to a drop in inflation. And furthermore, the Bank of England have still retained their stated objective to drive inflation downwards towards the 2.5% mark. So I think in that context, I feel that 3% is realistic. And furthermore, the MTFP, as I said earlier, we are still retaining that budget contingency figure of £200,000, which, as I say, I think it served us very well in 22-23 because it does allow us for these unexpected jumps in costs. I will keep the assumption under review during the budget setting process, but at the moment it stands as my best judgment, and I would stand by that as well.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Chair. My third question concerns the proposal from the Climate Change Steering Group to increase the fuel budget for the refuse collection fleet by £217,000 in order to be able to use vegetable oil as fuel instead of diesel as is being used at the moment. And my question there is that included in the medium-term financial plan? I have a further question on that.
Tony, have you got an answer for this, or Ben?
I've got a very simple. Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to talk over you. No, it's not included in the medium-term financial plan. I don't think a report has been to members yet for consideration or approval or anything like that. So it wouldn't be appropriate to put anything in the plan or in the budget at this stage anyway. Should a report come forward and recommendations be accepted, then clearly SLT would have to work with members to identify a suitable funding solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Paul, Catherine, would you like to make a comment on that as part of your brief?
Yes, I would, because I would hate anybody to misunderstand the process involved here. We have talked as members of this council informally about the potential cost of moving to hydrotreated vegetable oil for the refuse collection vehicles, but the decision whether to approach the councils in the joint waste contract, which are Hastings, ourselves, Wealdon and County Council, will be decided at the next joint waste committee meeting, which is in January. If that meeting decides to move forward with that proposal, we will then talk to our respective councils and get an answer. So you need to be able to distinguish, members of the council, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding patronising, I don't mean to, and certainly members of the public need to understand that this is an informal discussion with councillors at this stage, as Mr Baden has said, and has no place in the medium-term financial plan, because it is not a firm proposition. But in the interest of openness, it was certainly something we thought everybody should be aware of as a possibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, and I trust that's clarified that, Paul, has it?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Okay. Anybody else want to make any further observations on this report? Somebody move this report with the amendment for the deletion of the. We've got that. That other word in the second. That those in favour, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Tony. Agenda item 10. Yes, there's the exciting one, mid-year Treasury Management Review. I don't know whether Councillor Giawan would like to talk us through the detail of this, or we'll leave that to you, Tony, shall we?
I don't mind, Chair. I can't disagree with the sentiment. It is a somewhat mundane report. It is an important report, though. It's a Treasury Management update. Now, we send these reports to Audit and Standards Committee every quarter, but If Cabinet may remember that back in February 2022, they approved the annual Treasury Management and annual investment strategy. It's done every year. We'll do it again this February going forward. Within that strategy, it does require that Cabinet receives a mid-year annual report. So it's a copy almost of the report that went to Audit and Standards Committee in September, late September, a few weeks ago. I mean, the report, I don't want to go through the whole thing and repeat what's already there. There's nothing, the council's maintained its liquidity. Our investments fluctuate continuously, as I'm sure I've told you many times before. We haven't had any liquidity problems. We're not breaking any rules in terms of our borrowing and capital financing regime. So there's probably not really an awful lot I can add that I haven't already said to members previously, and I haven't already said to Audit and Standards Committee. I will just make one point, and I'm sure I've mentioned this previously as well, that there is a slight issue on the horizon for the council, and it's the what we call the IFRS 9 override. Now, what that means is it's an accounting standard, and what it means is for pooled investments such as our property funds, if we have any changes to those values, then at the moment we don't need to reflect them in our revenue budget. Because we have this what's called an override. The government have recently consulted local authorities, and we don't know what the outcome of that consultation is yet, but they've recently consulted local authorities saying, do you want the override to continue or do you want it done away with? Now, for us, our pooled investment values are higher than what we originally invested, so it would be an upward tick, if you like, in the revenue budget. But if it goes the other way, like it did during the pandemic, and the value of those investments fall, then that's a hit on our revenue budget. So if the override is done away with, there is potentially an issue there. And it will then sort of beg the question, really, well, do we want to keep investing money in such investments where we then become vulnerable to such volatile changes, if you like? The reason why we maintain those investments is because they are, in the coin of phrase, they're a really good earner, and they give us a lot of income. They give us a good, healthy return, and they're worth hanging on to. They're giving us £300,000, £350,000, I think it is, a year for us really doing nothing other than having the money invested in property. And our property managers and both investments are very good managers as well. Their performance is very good. So there's nothing that we can do about it at the moment. It's a watching brief, but I just wanted to. I've made this point to Audit and Standards Committee back in September. I may have made it earlier than then actually, and I just wanted to bring that to Cabinet's attention. That's probably the most relevant bit of this paper. Happy to try and take any questions if there are any, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Tony. As you say, this is a report that went to Audit and Standards back in September, so it's quite some little time ago. Councillor Hazel Timpey. Hazel.
Thank you, Tony. I think I asked you this question before, but some time has elapsed, so maybe you've got a feel for it. But this consultation, the actual override expires on the 31st of March. So when will is the consultation finished now, or do we have any clue as to which way it's going?
Thank you, Chair. For May, the consultation finished. It finished several weeks ago. I don't know what the outcome is, and I don't know when we will find out. I can't really say. I can't really update any more than that at the moment. I'm afraid, Chair.
Okay. Thank you for that, Tony. I think we're at a point where there's a report to be noted. If someone could just move that. Thank you. Thank you. Second. And those all in favour? Thank you very much, and that's unanimous. And thank you for your work on this, Tony. So, item 11.
Chair, I need to repeat my personal interest.
Yes, I've got that, Catherine. Thank you very much indeed. So this is as a result of scrutiny on the 28th of November regarding the closure that was imposed by Freedom Leisure on the Rye swimming pool. The committee received a verbal update and recommendations, and the minutes are reproduced below. And I think that it's a case that it's been brought to that all the options will be followed and the financial implications. I don't know whether Hazel, you want to add anything to that, or Ben, or even Malcolm, as to where we are. I know there are ongoing meetings taking place, and I think that's important that we do continue to have dialogue with everyone involved. Malcolm's arrived, so then I'll come back to you, Hazel, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point I wanted to make that we didn't mention at that scrutiny, but we have received a petition on this matter. It wasn't enough numbers to generate a discussion at council, but I think because we were already having a meeting on it, it would only be appropriate to actually say that we had received it. And as part of the response, of course, what went through scrutiny and tonight is part of our response to that. And just, if I may, just update members. I mean, we have continued ongoing discussions with Rye Town Council, and we're working very closely with Rye Town Council. And I think it was good to see the Mayor of Rye Town Council actually at the scrutiny meeting and taking part in that meeting. I think that was a very positive move. So thank you to the Chair of Scrutiny, Councillor Osborne, for sorting that out. We are looking at all the options as moving forward, but the main thrust of those options is, again, what can we do to keep Rye Swimming Pool open? That's what we're trying to work at, and what does the model look like? So I've nothing further to report at this point, other than to say I have another meeting with myself and Councillor Timpey have a meeting with Rye Town Council next week to continue those discussions. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Do you want to add anything, Ben, and then Hazel?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as part of that review into looking at all the options that Malcolm mentioned, an expression of interest was submitted to the Community Infrastructure Levy Panel. That expression of interest has been accepted, and a further bid will be worked up. That was quite a high-level expression of interest, given that there was a lot of unknowns, but the team will be moving forward now to secure a bid at the next consideration of that panel to ensure that we can develop up a project that will assist in keeping that pool open.
Thank you. Hazel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, that bid is for the solar panels, is it, or for other things?
It's based around reducing the reliance on fossil fuels and therefore giving it stability in terms of, sort of making sure it's sustainable going forward. But yeah, it's not just solar panels. We're looking at a whole range of infrastructure that might be applicable to that site.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Malcolm has said, is that we are really working to keep this pool open, not only with Freedom Leisure but with Rye Town Council, and I truly believe that everything is being done that can be done, and it seems to be, but we are on quite a tight schedule here, because we're looking at, if the government doesn't decide to support the leisure industry, I think in January we're looking at, then other options will have to come forward, and I really believe that Rye Town Council are fully aware that something has got to happen, possibly with the community support. I think it's there when you look at that petition. There's the number of people that want to keep it open in Rye. There's all sorts of options. So, but we really do want to keep it open for the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss, Christine.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to say, a big thank you to Councillor Timpey and our Chief Executive and the team for doing everything they can to keep this, to keep the Rye pool open. I mean, we just need to remember, I'm the Cabinet member with responsibility for economic development and regeneration. The businesses across Rother are suffering because of this energy crisis. And the government really need to get its act together and think really hard about how it's supporting those businesses with high energy usage. I don't think it's to deflect the blame, if you like, onto councils, local councils, and businesses that are trying to operate in this situation. It is the answer. It really deserves a proper strategic response from the government to supporting all sorts of businesses right across. And as I say, I'm dealing with restaurants and catering businesses that are particularly high users of energy, like Rypool and other high, other industries which have a high fuel costs, and it's really bleak out there for people. So I just want to make the point that this isn't just Rypool. This is a whole host of other businesses that are suffering, and we really need the government to act sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was a good meeting. It was just as well that the Chief Executive of Freedom Leisure wasn't available at a previous meeting, because that one went on for about 2 3/4 hours, and this one on its own went on for over an hour and a half. So it was just as well we had a sort of separate meeting. We had a few people from Rye Town Council and the locality in the town hall, and I believe there was 70 odd people watching via the webcast. So it was sort of, you could say it was well attended. We didn't get any answers. I think if people were looking for the silver bullet to reopen it next week, we didn't get it, and we're not going to, in all honesty. But I think it's good to see that everybody is working and singing from the same hymn sheet. Nobody wants the facility closed as it is now, and we need to, we've just got to find a way of getting it reopened. I think if we're going to do anything, the officer recommendation probably needs a little bit of a beef up, because I think we mentioned lobbying our MPs and government for sort of targeted support. The government are supporting businesses with energy costs sort of across the board, but you could argue, do Tesco's, Sainsbury's, large supermarkets and profitable businesses such as that need support with their energy when, we found out on Thursday, listening to Ivan on Jeremy Vine's show, as it happened, that there's sort of many hundreds of leisure pools across the country are in a similar position, that if they're not closed now, in the next 6 months they probably will be. And Sharon Davis was on the same call as him and UK Swimming, and they all have the same concerns. The government need to target any assistance they've got, take it away, if you like, from large profitable supermarkets, and give it to sort of high, not sort of necessarily high profitable, but high users of energy to support it. And we also mentioned the health service could help as well. There's all sorts of things that the swimming helps people, either through recuperation after operations, or just keeping their head straight. And that is something to be looked at. And also schools, I think there's 7 or 9 primary schools that use that pool who aren't now. And they're having to find alternatives because kids have got to learn to swim as part of the curriculum. So it's a really difficult one. And if we could just, if we could find a way, we've got to do it, because people need it. But it's an awkward one, and the sort of rebound after COVID, I think the Rypool is running at 79% of pre-COVID usage, and you think, it's only 20%, but if you're running tight, 20% is a lot. And if your costs have gone up a lot as well, then you can see where the problem is coming from. So if we can add to the recommendation to lobby our MPs, which I'm sure we're doing, to lobby government to sort of get more targeted support, then I think that's what we've got to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Effectively, I think when the report comes forward into the new year, all of these aspects will be covered off, almost certainly. I think we all see the benefits that are there, and it's not peculiar to Freedom Leisure, and rather up and down the country daily you're always reading reports that leisure centres are being closed, swimming pools are being closed, and there's an acute shortage of funding, and the options are not very clear to see. Externally, on the remote, Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, Chairman, I would support Councillor Osborne in suggesting that we add to the recommendations that we do take this up through the LGA with government. One of the strongest points made to us by Freedom Leisure is this is a national problem, and the government, while they are giving extensive support to business, are doing it on a blanket basis. If they were to target this support to the industries that are really hit, it would be helpful. The other thing is just to remind you that the NHS is not a government department, but a freestanding body, although publicly owned. And it would be good to talk to the local partnerships, both the primary care partnership locally and the integrated Sussex partnership, to remind them that swimming probably would generate savings in their budget if they only invested in ours. And it seems to me that point, which Ben Hook is well aware of, is well worth making to those local health organisations. It's a relatively small sum, but the savings are huge when you think of the convalescent people who benefit from actually swimming and from those who actually gain a great deal of mental health and well-being physically from swimming.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Thank you, John. Malcolm, could I invite you to make because I know you've been involved very closely with all parties involved in the exploring all the options to date.
Obviously, whether members wish to include it in the recommendations is entirely up to them, but I can assure Councillor Barnes that we have been talking to other people about that, and Councillor Barnes raises a good point, is that often the investment that we as a local authority put into leisure and things like that don't appear in our budgets, but are actually in other people's budgets. We've also continually, Chair, as you will know, because you've been at the meetings, have raised it with the MPs as an issue. And I understand that what the government will do in January is look at whether, A, there needs to be further support and what that support will look like. But I also understand that it is likely to be more targeted. So the argument needs to be made to government about making sure that the sectors that we believe are important are among the vulnerable categories that the government will target. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Jonathan Vinehall.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I agree with Paul Osborne, Councillor Osborne. I think he's made the point. I think it was raised today in the meetings that they had. I think, having said all of that, it is clear that there is a new model required for the management and of leisure facilities anyway, pools particularly, as there was a new model required a number of years ago, which is why the Freedom Leisure and others emerged. So I think there is, I think we are seeing a change, and it's working through that change. And so I think what Councillor Barnes, I share his aspiration, but the reality is, the pragmatic reality is, it's never going to happen that the health service somehow cross-subsidises pools as much as we would like that to happen. And I agree entirely with his intentions. And I've seen what he's talking about in action, but I think pragmatically there's going to be a different solution, which will probably involve much more localisation of the management longer term.
I've got one other question or point to make. It's Councillor Cortell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm glad, as Mr. Hook has suggested, that the Community Infrastructure Levy Allocations Panel has indicated a high-level expression of interest. I'm also pleased that this isn't just relating to solar panels, but probably to heat pumps and any other technology which will both help our climate change agenda and the financial situation at Rye Swimming Pool. I think Councillor Barnes has said the other thing that I was going to say, which is about the health and well-being benefits concerning both physical health and mental health of keeping Rye Swimming Pool open, the savings on the NHS budget, and possibly approaching the NHS with regards to making some contribution towards Rye Swimming Pool.
Okay, we're almost bringing this sort of to a conclusion, but I see that John Barnes wants to say something, and also Jeanette Stevens. So
could I, Chairman, just come back to Jonathan a moment? There is a thing called social prescribing, and if the primary care partnership were to put some budget to that, it would be a useful source of additional income. It wouldn't solve the problem, but it would help.
Thank you for that. Jeanette?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really good that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Me and Paul went to a meeting last week with Freedom Leisure, and they were really upbeat and looking forward to some solutions. So hopefully, between us all, we can get Rye Pool back open. Thank you very much.
I think there is an intent, and I think that we will continue to work with Freedom Leisure and the Town Council and explore all options that are available to us, and that would include, of course, lobbying those parties that we feel there is some benefit and interest to get on side. Right, thank you. Can we, nothing to add to that, Ben or Malcolm? So, Hazel, would you like to move this report?
Sorry, Chairman. Did you want to indicate the additionality of lobbying, or is that?
Well, I think there's every reason to. There's no reason not to include that. I think that's all part of our brief. So, if we can, RDC continue to work with Freedom Leisure and Rye Town Council to explore all options, lobbying, whatever we're talking about, our MPs and any other organisations. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. To make sure that swimming pools are targeted. If there is going to be some sort of scheme in January, I think it's really important that we send that message to government via our MPs.
Yeah. I think we've captured that in the resolution. Yeah,
that's fine. Will do. Sorry, Hazel, you're going to move this report?
Yeah, I'd like to move. Thank you.
And someone to second that? Okay. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. And thank you very much for those that attended remotely. I'm sure it's nice and warm and cosy where you are. No journeys home tonight. Don't get stranded, Kevin. And we'll catch up with everybody in due course, and we'll close the meeting at something like 8:06. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Good night, and stay warm and safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doug. Bye-bye.
All right.